Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Neal Barrett. I'm Managing Director of Keba Computer Services. We're a managed service provider in the Midlands. So those of you who have come in to this webinar via me, you'll already know that. But I'm just introducing myself for those of you who've come in via Neal, the other Neal, the Neal who I always joke doesn't spell his name correctly. But we won't go there today. Neal, do you just want to introduce yourself, and then Ryan as well, and then I'll get started, and then hopefully can introduce you guys for your main bits a bit later on.
Thank you. Cheers, Neal. Hi everybody. Neal Lowe, Managing Director of the Needham Group. We are a branch of insurance brokers based in the UK. We've got an office in Nuneaton, Sheffield, Weybridge and Petersfield. We look after a lot of business clients. And one of the reasons why we've put together today is to emphasise the importance of a new product that's really coming into the UK, which is sort of cyber insurance. So I'll pass you over to Ryan.
Thanks, Neal. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ryan Atkinson from Coalition. So I manage business development for Coalition, covering the Midlands, Wales and the Southwest. And just to give you an idea, Coalition, we are a specialist cyber insurer based out the UK, but we've also got offices out the US, Australia, Canada and Germany now as well. So we are going worldwide eventually. But yeah, just to give you an idea, we specialise in only cyber. So this is what we do, and this is hopefully what I'm going to elaborate a little bit further on today as well.
Okay, thanks Ryan, thanks Neal. So just to give you all a bit of a background, Neal and I have known each other probably for about 15 years socially, and he's been my insurance broker for at least 10 of those years, probably longer if I dare to think about it. But we often get questions. Well, let's start from the beginning. So the reason this all occurred, and the reason I asked Neal to see if he would be willing to do this with me, is because we help our customers get through their Cyber Essentials certification, and as part of that certification, IASME, I think that's how you pronounce it, but they're the governing body that deal with Cyber Essentials in the UK. They now offer free cyber insurance, and say free, you know, in inverted commas, because free is very rarely good value. And I keep getting asked, is it, you know, do we still need cyber insurance? Now we have this certification, do we need it anyway? Is this product any good? And I honestly don't know the answer to that. So I thought I had a quick chat with Neal. So Neal, would you be willing to come and have a discussion with us online and answer those kind of questions really? And he very helpfully said yes and invited Ryan to come along as well. So that's basically how this came about. So Cyber Essentials is sort of the government recognized certification that basically proves that you as a business are taking cyber security reasonably seriously. It's not a difficult certification to get if you have a good MSP or somebody who knows a little bit about cybersecurity. Most of the things you have to do, you would have been done anyway, so, which is great. And basically, it's just a questionnaire, really, just a tick box questionnaire to make sure that you've done those things, and helping to making sure that you protect the data that you hold about your customers or your suppliers or anybody else. So why people often ask me as well, why should you have it? Well, it's just really it's good. Most people do it because they have to if they go for public sector contracts. So local authorities, that kind of thing, will often ask for that certification as a sort of a proof that you're at a certain level of cyber awareness. But increasingly, it's more relevant, increasingly relevant for business to business communications, and you know, people will often look at suppliers and you know, look at that as one of the deciding factors if they're going to use a supplier or not, because the last thing they want is their data or their customers' data to be breached by someone in their supply chain. So there's lots of benefits to having it, really. There is a cost, I think. I think for businesses of 1 to 10 employees, it's about £400 a year now. That goes up depending on the number of employees that you have. And it's an annual cost and it's an annual certification, so you just have to be renewed. But we help our customers get that certification through the services that we provide, and it's a service that we provide for free for our managed service customers. One of the other things that we do that adds a bit more value, it's not relevant really for the certification itself, but we have a pen testing solution which we use that, and Ryan might talk about this later on as well, because I think he uses something similar for basically assessing the scope of a risk, or cyber risk. But we use a solution that basically does some internal pen testing and sort of looks sideways in our network and tries to identify other things that might be at risk if a cyber attacker got internal access via, somebody clicking something, downloading something inadvertently, or getting an email and opening an attachment perhaps they shouldn't have opened. So there's many things. Ultimately, there's many ways that these things can be compromised, even if you still have a Cyber Essentials certification. And Ryan will hopefully update us a bit later about the current trends, what's happening as we speak now in sort of the end of Q3 2024, as to what the current trends are, where the claims are coming from, what people are claiming for, in terms of in terms of the risk that he's insuring. So yeah, really, I think that's probably about it from me. I'll now hand over to Neil, if I may, Neil. And then
that's fine. Yeah.
You can introduce Ryan, talk about your relationship, and then Ryan, hopefully you can take us from there. Just to mention as well that the QA isn't enabled, unfortunately, for various reasons on this webinar. So if you do have any questions as we go through, please email them directly to me. I'm the one who will have sent you your invite to this event today. If you send them to me, I'll direct them to Neil and Ryan if they're not relevant for me after the event, and then hopefully the guys can give you a more personalised response to your question. So I hope that's acceptable. Anyway, Neil, take it away.
Cheers, Neil. Thank you. Cheers, guys. Thank you for attending this event that we've put together. One of the things that we always get asked as a broker is, how do I protect the revenue that I would lose if I had a cyber attack, or if my system was hacked, or my system was held to ransom and I was unable to use it and unable to generate revenue? One of the things that a lot of businesses now do is a lot of businesses now have an online presence, which just does generate significant amounts of money for them. So having the sort of the blockages to their websites and potentially being unable to trade can cause them massive financial problems for a period of time whilst the problem is resolved. And the partners that we've sort of looked at to do this work with, Coalition are predominantly a cyber insurer that is slightly different to the norm, as in that they go over and above what you would expect an insurer to do in terms of trying to recover monies that have been stolen from clients, etc. They've got a massive experience within the US market, so they are the partners that we speak to in relation to any of our clients needing help. So I'm now going to pass over to Ryan so he can give you a couple of examples of things that are happening at the moment in the cyber world, and enlighten you on things that are happening at the moment. So over to you, Ryan.
Cheers, Neil. Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen to start with then, and got everyone should let me know you can see that.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Right, it's just while that's sort of loads in and whatnot. Just to elaborate on what Neil was saying originally is obviously, yeah, Cyber Essentials does serve a purpose, and it is there for a good reason, obviously, to get people up to a minimum standard. Now, the one thing I will start with is I'm going to talk a lot today about the differences in those covers that you get maybe for free or as an add-on to another policy, and where that differs to the standalone policies that you can get. So just before I go into that, the one thing I want to say is that any level of cover is better than no cover at all. So when you are taking this out and when you are looking at Cyber Essentials, please do not think just because you don't have that you've got that small amount of cover that obviously firstly that it's nothing, it means nothing, because any cover is better than no cover. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, is just going into the key facts about that and highlighting where these claims costs add up, and hopefully just give you a little bit more insights into current trends and what's going on in the market and how that might affect you guys as business owners as such moving forward. So not much on this screen other than a lovely picture of me, and basically just going to go in about insurance and a little bit about cybersecurity today for you guys. So the first thing that I want to highlight is in relation to technology. Now, obviously looking back 10 years, over these 10 years since everything's developed, technology is playing a massive part in everyone's business. And a few of these key areas that I've highlighted here, this is what a lot of people don't even realize, where they're vulnerable and where they could be subject to an attack. Now, the main one that pretty much everyone uses is email, and we're going to touch on that in quite a few different points today. We've got some case studies to highlight this as well, and just to sort of maybe open a few eyes today, just to see where these claims can come from and how these costs can add up as well. But realistically, what this is here for is just to highlight to you guys, just to say this is where you could potentially be vulnerable that you may not have even identified in the past. So obviously things like employee information, and any supplier information, it's all personal identifiable information and all records that you don't want to get into the hands of the wrong people. Things like payroll and your finance and invoices, again, similar sort of thing, but if somebody gets access to that, they may have access to your whole financial records and access to making more payments and things on your behalf that you may not want to make as such as well. So again, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on these sections just to highlight this to you guys today. So just off that as well, some of the things that are sort of main that we're seeing that are easily exploited are emails, online banking, and remote services. Now, again, emails, we see things like business email compromise. What this is when an attacker gains control of your emails and they then start altering things that you're sending. So whether it be invoices that you're sending to suppliers, whether it be things that are coming in from suppliers to you, or whether it just be an email chain that is going from one of yourselves to an employee, could be with regards to payroll or anything like that. But this is where an attacker sits in your system and effectively compromises your whole email base there as well. Now, a lot of the time, this is the way in that people find, and then they start accessing things like online banking. They'll force things like a password reset, which will again go to your emails. That's where if somebody is sat in your emails, they will then push and they will have access to that and to reset your password. And if you haven't got two-factor authentication enabled, the attacker will enable that once they're into your system. So again, something just to bear in mind. And now the next one, remote services. This is something that has become a lot more prevalent since COVID hit. Now, pre-COVID, there was probably a handful of businesses within the UK that had remote services set up. Since COVID, I'd say a massive more portion of those businesses have now got remote services accessed within their business. What this also means for businesses is what it can be is this is a main way in that attackers use to gain access to your systems. Now, remote in systems and remote in services, if they're not protected correctly, is a way in that we again will highlight shortly and how people have managed to gain access through this as well. But again, just to show there some of the losses that we saw back in 2021. This is sort of the average losses that we saw as a result of these different attacks. And the reason we highlight these average losses is that one of the key things that we get a lot from clients is that businesses are too small to be attacked, which again, we're going to highlight a little bit further on as well. but also how the values are sometimes small, or maybe it's irrelevant to a business of certain size. So again, just to highlight, this is the average loss that we saw in 2021 for these different services. Moving on from that, where we've seen things change over the past couple of years is the main thing has become automation and AI. So AI, as a lot of people have seen through news and through different media outlets, that AI is playing a big part in everything that we do now. So it's also playing a massive part when it comes to cybercrime as well. And what we're seeing is that rather than attackers now looking for a particular size business, what they're doing is they're looking for a particular vulnerability. So regardless of size of organization, what they're doing is they're looking to attack on scale. So they're not now thinking, let's attack a FTSE 500 business. They're thinking, let's just attack 500 smaller businesses, and we'll ask for a smaller amount, but the return will be a lot greater based on that as well. So like I say, what they're doing is they're then scanning the web, which I'll show you shortly on what we do and how we do it. But they're using similar tools to what we use to actually identify those targets. And then they're looking for what we call low-hanging fruit, looking for businesses that aren't protected properly. And then obviously then they are leveraging against that at mass and at scale as well. And this is where it's become a massive monetization for these threat actors as such as well. And one of the things that I will say is a lot of people still are under the false impression that cyber criminals are a single person sat in a basement somewhere trying to attack a business. That's not the case. These businesses, I say business, these threat actors are now set up to look like legitimate businesses. People turn up and do a 9 to 5, and they think they're going to a normal job and going to work as such. These criminal organizations, they have online chat functions, they have call centers, they have everything that you would expect within a general business. So please don't take it for granted when that is the case, where you're thinking that this is one single person performing this attack. It's not the case anymore. This has become very sophisticated and moved on a lot. So just some of the figures to sort of tie this up then. Obviously, automated attacks are making small businesses easier to target. We've seen a 54% increase in frequency of funds transfer fraud incidents for small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, what a funds transfer fraud incident is, that is when an invoice gets sent, let's say from you to a supplier, or somebody sends you an invoice, and an attacker intercepts that invoice, changes those details, so payments get sent to the fraudulent third party. Now, sometimes in that case, it can take 30, 60 days to even realize that you've been attacked. Depends how long your invoice system and your payment structure is. If you're not chasing that payment again for another 30 days or potentially 60 days, it could be 60 days before you realize you've made a fraudulent payment. And the other thing that we're seeing is a 40% increase in frequency of ransomware attacks. Again, this all comes back to automation and AI, how it's making it easier for these people to leverage access to businesses' systems as such. Because it is now done and it's automated and done at scale, it takes a lot less skill to gain access to a business. And because of that, we are seeing, like I say, a massive increase in those ransomware attacks as well. So the main point that I wanted to highlight on this slide here is what cyber insurance would cover. Now, I'm not going to go into every point on this section, but what I wanted to do is just to highlight where a lot of people see that cyber insurance will pay if there's a ransom event or if there is a fraudulent payment made to somebody. There's a lot of underlying factors within a cyber policy and a cyber claim that most businesses take for granted and they don't realize are there as such. So just to highlight a few of these on here, obviously we've got upfront fees, instant response, legal services, forensic investigation, ransom demands, and breach notifications. That's all pretty much just one section that each one could negate a different and bring a different cost to a business as well. We've got obviously things like lost funds through financial fraud. Now, the one thing just to highlight on this is when a fraudulent payment is made to a threat actor, to a fraudulent third party, without insurance in place, you still have to make that payment. So you'd have to go back and still make that payment to a supplier. It's not their fault that that's been made to a fraudulent third party. So effectively you're out of pocket twice. This is where insurance comes in to reimburse you for those types of events. And again, one of the key things that we see that a lot of businesses don't realize they're actually liable for is third-party costs. Now, if you had a breach yourself internally and that resulted in one of your third-party businesses, someone that you work with, result to a cyber attack as well, you yourself could be liable for that, for the costs of that claim. So again, just bear that in mind. And again, one of the other things that we see is massively is lost revenue. If an attacker does get into your system and manages to bring that down, how long will it take for you to get back up and running? Who would you have to employ to get that data back? And would it be possible for you to get that data back and be back up into a position that you were previously? And again, that falls into the restoration and recovery of system and data as well. It could be expensive if you have to get a forensic accountant in to come and look through your account and try and restructure a whole digital account system as well. So that just brings me on to how Coalition work and what we do slightly different to the rest of the market. So one of the things that we do, which I will highlight a little bit more at the end of this, but we effectively look at all clients' digital infrastructure. We highlight that by looking at it through domain scans. So what we do is we scan your guys as clients' domains, and we highlight any vulnerabilities or potential vulnerabilities that an attacker could use, and we pass all that information back to you guys as potential policyholders. So just looking for a quote, or policyholders as well. So we're assessing that risk at point of quote. You guys can approach Neil as well on this, or any of the guys at Needham's, to get a quote from Coalition and also get this risk assessment, which will highlight anything that we've found through that vulnerability scan as well. Now, the next section is obviously to protect our potential clients, protect our clients. Now, the way we do this is we reinitiate that scan month on month as well. And what we do with that is we then pass all that information back to policyholders, and we're trying to mitigate against claims and stop claims from happening. We have an in-house claims, incident response and cybersecurity team as well, which what they can do is they can jump in and actually help mitigate against these risks as well. So not everyone is going to be an IT cybersecurity expert. This is where we could come in and help, where if you have got questions regarding anything that's been flagged, we have got a cybersecurity team that can jump in and actually help you with that as well. And then we've got our response section as well, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more detail in a minute, and the comprehensive cover that we offer as well. So just to highlight a few of the things of how we assess this data. Some of the ways in which we do this, you'll see there is, this is where we gather a lot of our data from. Now, I'm only going to touch on a couple of these. First one being the dark web chat room surveillance. So we have obviously people set up in dark web chat rooms, monitoring this and looking for potential vulnerabilities, looking for ways in that these attackers might use. And again, we're passing all this information back to our policyholders to help protect them and see fewer claims. So by doing this and the way that we work in the market, we see roughly 65% less claims than the market average. And again, it's because we're trying to mitigate against risk rather than just responding when there is a claim. We're trying to stop those claims from ever happening. The next thing we have is our honeypot networks. Now, our honeypot networks are effectively servers that are set up, they're scattered all over the world to look like legitimate businesses. And their only purpose is to actually let people come and attack them. Reason for this is we can then identify how these attackers have gained access to our server, what they've leveraged when they're in there, what they've searched for to actually identify the attack surface, and how they've done all this as well. And again, we gather all this information and pass it back to policyholders, so potential policyholders and you guys aren't then subject to the same things that we've seen as well. So as I mentioned on this section, when we help protect our policyholders, we give all policyholders access to Coalition Control, which is our third-party standalone software, which, like I say, every single policyholder gains access to this. And effectively what you can do is you can just see everything that we've scanned for on the web, and you get remediation and advice, tips and hints on there as well as to how to improve your cybersecurity. Now, just in the response section, there's a few things in here that I wanted to just touch on. Obviously, I mentioned we've got an in-house claims team, and all businesses that do opt for Coalition Instant Response, which, like I say, Coalition Instant Response, our own team works internally. But if you do use our own internal instant response team, then your accesses for the instant response section are reduced to nil. So again, just a little bit as to highlight that for you. And then again, one of the things that Neil touched on as well is how we actually recover funds. Now, this is different to any market in the UK. So no other cyber insurer within the UK has the ability to do this and what we do. Now, when there is a funds transfer fraud event that I mentioned earlier, our team will actively go and try and get those funds back on behalf of you guys as policyholders. And the way we do that is we leverage our network of accounts with banks, with forensic accountants, with legal services, and with the criminal organizations as well, all over the world. So again, the way that works is that we will actually try and get funds back on behalf of policyholders outside of the limits of indemnity, which again, we could talk about in more detail on a potential quote by quote basis, but just to give you an idea, and there is a case study on this a little bit later on, just to go into more detail on this. And the only thing that I'm going to mention on here as well, just as a benefit to policyholders, is our pay on behalf of language. What this means is that when there is a claim, let's say a ransomware event, we're not asking our policyholders to make that payment to the threat actor and then claim it back from us. Now, a lot of small businesses don't have the capital to actually raise that money and make that payment to the end third party. So what we will do is we will pay those costs direct to the end threat actor. Again, saving businesses money on there, and also saving things like interest if things like loans and that would generally have to be taken out, which again, all insurance policies don't take interest into account as well if you have had to take a loan out. So it's something just worth bearing in mind. And just to highlight our honeypot network. So this is our honeypot server in London. Just to give you an idea, this is the October data from last year, and it was attacked 91 million times in the month of October. So just again highlights how many times you could be subject to an attack. And this is what's happened on a server that is just set up and just sat there to look like a legitimate business. So a few things just to touch on now is some of the things that threat actors are looking for, which we're going to talk on a little bit more detail. So end-of-life software is a key thing that we see as a potential vulnerability. Now, end-of-life software is things like if you haven't performed patch updates or just general updates to your software, once they become out of date and they come to effectively end of life, this is when they become subject to vulnerabilities and potential attacks. Just to highlight there, you'll see some of the percentages here. Like obviously, it's back in the second half of 2022, you're 3.69 times more likely to have an attack if you had any end-of-life software. So little things like this, where again, working with your IT provider as well can help this and help you push things forward on this and just stop little things becoming subject to attack. And again, this is where we help as a business with pushing that information back to policyholders and hopefully identifying issues so that this doesn't become an issue going forward. And then again, one of the just things to highlight on here is I mentioned that we've seen severity increase for funds transfer fraud claims. So again, this is just highlighting some of the values on this, how in 2020, the average claim was 117,000. It's now increased to around 197,000. This was back in 2022. So obviously last year, ransomware went up again, and you'll see there 78% increase we saw in ransomware claims between Q3 and Q4 2022. And 1.64 million was actually the average ransom demand in Q1 of 2023. We saw a 16% increase in ransomware claims. So between Q4 and Q1 2023, we saw, like I say, a 16% increase. And there was a 64% increase in the average ransom demand from the 2022 average. What this highlights as well is the importance of having somebody on your side that does know what they're doing. Now, when I say there's 64% increase in the average ransom demand, that is the initial demand from a threat actor. When you've got a cyber insurance policy and you've got somebody that's sitting behind this to actually help you out, we have ransomware negotiators that will jump in and negotiate these ransoms down. And again, we will try and always keep your ransom payments to within the allotted amount within the policy. But again, this is where you've got a benefit of working with an insurance company. So one of the key things that a lot of people say to me is we're too small to be attacked, or we don't use enough data, we don't use enough this, and we're not going to be subject to an attack. Now, one of the things you'll see there is phishing still resulting in 76% of reported claims. What that comes back to is 76% of claims resulted from human error. So this could be a single point of failure within a business. All that is an email sent out, and as it is there, it's a phishing email. There's no purpose to this other than to try and get somebody to click it. We sent out en masse, and as we still see, 76% of claims resulting from that. And us at Coalition personally saw phishing attacks increase 35% from 2021. So I'm just going to go over a couple of case studies now just to sort of finish up. This first one is around a business that actually paid a ransom and they were denied the encryption key. So the encryption key is that when an attacker gains access to your systems, they then decrypt all the data within that. What happened here is a ransom was paid and the decryption key wasn't given over. So what the main thing we're highlighting here is, even if the ransom is paid, it doesn't always mean that it's going to be problem solved and back to square one. Because within this instant here and within this event, what happened is we still had to employ things like forensic accountants. We still had to do that, but it was all covered within the cost of the policy. Just so that's what I wanted to highlight here, is that there is additional cost that can come as this. It's not just paying that initial ransom demands. And on this, there was actually 2 ransomware attackers within there. So it was actually double locked as such, where because both of them had access to that, the demands were, we had to negotiate with 2 different parties to actually pay that ransom as such as well. So again, this next one is around the law firm. It was a fairly small law firm, but it had a ransom demand. With that, all the client paid towards it was $5,000. And again, the initial ransom demand was $500,000. We negotiated that in half, and the end payment was $250,000. Again, one of the things highlighting on here is the fact of, if you've got somebody in your corner and a ransomware negotiator doing this for you, they will negotiate these payments down, and 9 times out of 10, it will not be the end. The end payment will not be the starting what you've got asked for at the start. So again, factor that in and bear in mind that if you've got somebody doing that for you, they are professionals and they are good at what they do. So on another side of things, one of the things that a lot of people don't think of or don't even realize is when customer data gets leaked. So this was a business email compromise. It was a CEO's account that got attacked, and as part of that, there was a lot of personal data that was leaked. Now, one of the things that people don't factor in when it comes to a cyber incident or cyber claim is when you have to notify the relevant parties and how you go about that if there is a data breach. Now, this is what a cyber policy will cover for. And as you'll see here, there was nothing actually paid out to any fraudulent third party, but the claims cost still came up to £93,000. Again, what that's highlighting is the sheer cost of just doing things like notifying the relevant people and actually trying to restore some data on there as well. It's not just all payments to fraudulent people and trying to recover funds. There is these small amount of payments that all add up and make it substantial for a business of any size to try and compensate for. Now, the last one I want to highlight and last case study from me is, this is a law firm that we worked with recently. So this claim was only a few weeks ago. What happened was there was a business email compromise, and effectively over a space of time, there was a multiple amount of payments that were made to fraudulent third parties. It totaled 1.4 million. So 1 million of this was client funds as well. So just to highlight that, if anyone is dealing with client money, it is still accessible by these attackers. But so 1 million of that money wasn't even theirs that they'd lost as such, because an attacker had got in and stolen that money effectively, or it was money that was transferred and it had gone to a fraudulent third party rather than going to an end client. Now, what our team did is we managed to chase this money through the banking systems. We employed forensic accountants and we employed legal services, and we actually managed to get all this money back for the clients. So out of the 1.4 million that was paid originally, we only actually had a 250 grand limit on the policy. So that was all we were liable to pay back to the clients. But as part of our service, we will go and try and claw back those funds on behalf of policyholders. And that's exactly what we did here. And we managed to claw back all of the 1.4 million. I say all of it. I think there was about £39 that was in admin and transfer fees from the banks, but the client was still pretty happy that we managed to recover all bar £39. So they weren't really concerned about that. But again, one of the key things to take away from this is when you have got a cyber insurance policy, if anything happens, the best thing that you can do is to notify them as soon as possible. The sooner that an insurer is involved, especially when it is coalition and we have the access to do this, we can go and try and get that money back for you. So one of the last things from me is this is just a snapshot of our risk assessment. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you guys can approach Needham's and get a quote. And with every quote, you will get a risk assessment, which will highlight your potential vulnerabilities and anywhere where you could fix this as well. But again, please contact them and you will be able to access that as well. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And I am just going to stop sharing my screen now and
thanks, Ryan.
I'm back over to Neil. Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much. That's really interesting. So what are the claims that are you're seeing coming through at the moment? Where are the peaks at the moment? Is it business email compromise where somebody's modifying invoices before they get sent out, or is it other things? What's being claimed for mostly at the moment?
Yeah, business email compromise is one of the biggest that we're seeing. And again, the main reason for that is because of things like phishing incidents, because we're still seeing attacks 75% of attacks originate from phishing and from those sorts of threat vectors. This is still a massive place where people are vulnerable. So all it takes is somebody to gain access to your emails through a phishing email, and then they sit there and they wait. They'll wait for something of interest to go across your desk, whether it be an invoice, whether it be something of sensitive data, something that they can leverage. And this is where we're still seeing the majority of attacks come from, is business email compromise.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we're trying to encourage people to do at the moment is to let us try and encourage people to spend a bit more money on the licensing and enable conditional access, so we can restrict access based on device, on location, things like that. Because most of these cyber criminals are, like I say, big organised units. Most people don't like to discuss it, but it's nation states effectively, isn't it? And they're abroad.
Nobody will like to admit it, but it is.
Well, exactly. Yeah,
it is happening. So
exactly, and the massive operations, and they're obviously abroad and trying to get currency into their own economy effectively by charging these ransoms. So it's one of the things that we're trying to make people aware of, is that with simply, as email is the main initial attack vector, if you like, it's one of the key areas that we keep needing to protect, and with staff, like you say, not being necessarily based in the same office all the time and working remotely, you can't overhear what someone's just said and said, oh, did you see this email from such and such? And you might respond to something without, not the same way as you would do in the office if you were with your colleagues, I guess, is the scenario, and that's where the risk comes.
If an email comes from your colleague,
well, that's right, yeah,
and you can't even verify that without going back. And if they've already had their emails compromised, they're going to come back. And what we're seeing, one of the key things that we're seeing play a big part in this now is, again, AI. But the way that this is playing a big part is, what they will do is AI will analyze your whole inbox and identify how you actually send an email, how you sign off an email, how you speak to certain people. So when it is sent, and when a fraudulent email is then sent from your account, it looks and sounds exactly how you would normally. So there's no reason for anyone to think that there's anything wrong with that as such. So we are seeing that play a massive part in, it's not just your old-fashioned emails of a Nigerian prince emailing asking, saying, do you want some money in your account? It's become a lot more civilized than that, and we're still seeing roughly majority of attackers don't become subject to prosecution. So it's only something that's going to get bigger and bigger as well going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And I think as well, just touching on the claims that we're seeing as a business, is that there's less and less physical claims now against a business, where people previously would have broken into a client's premises and nicked some computers or nicked some stock or whatever it may be. a lot more claims now are being done without actually getting into the business, but they're getting into the business's infrastructure, and doing the fraudulent cyber acts as opposed to actually physically breaking into someone's business. So it's a complete change, and it's something that the insurers are now sort of aware of. And cyber insurance is going to be one of those things that over the next couple of years, the vast majority of clients will have it as part of their insurance buying program, because it's open to so many opportunists and people that can actually do damage to your business for the long term. So,
actually, going just on that point, Neil and Brian, perhaps I don't recall you mentioning it in any real detail, but the business interruption element of this, how is that affecting your policy? I mean, people might not be aware of how long it might take to put this stuff back. Even if we've got a good backup and we can restore it somewhere, it's getting somewhere to getting a clean server to restore it onto, getting some clean machines for people to use. I mean, that can take days, I mean, weeks. And if people can't access if you've got a business of 20 people and they can't access those computers, they can't access their accounting system, they can't run a warehouse system, they can't send any goods out, they can't do any business to raise any invoices. That's a massive issue in terms of lost wages. And so is there a business interruption element here that is an addition to this cyber thing, or is it covered by the policy? How does that kind of work?
It's all covered as part of the policy. So within an cyber insurance policy, any sort of business, I can only talk for sort of our insurance policy as well.
Sure.
Obviously, with that in mind, anything that any business interruption that's as a result of a cyber attack would be covered on this. And you were mentioning there, like sort of days, weeks. I mean, sometimes we're seeing this take months to recover.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things within that businesses don't even realize when it comes to, and how reliant you might actually be on a server. And it's not only then the time that it takes to get back up and running, but the money that you've lost as a result of that as well. If you can't actually function, we're seeing manufacturing businesses that are fully reliant on cloud-based systems to actually run all their machines now. And you talk about if an attacker's got into your system and they're leveraging that for weeks, how much business are people going to lose within those weeks of not being able to access those systems?
Yeah.
One of the other key things.
Yeah, it's reputational damage as well, isn't it? Because there's a lot of kudos that if you sort of if it gets out that you've had an attack, and it does put potential customers and clients off dealing with you in the future, because of the fact that they don't see that you're taking your security of your data seriously. So there is a reputational sort of aspect to this as well. So it's sort of stuff that, like, I suppose Ryan hit it on the head with the first slide that he showed, is that technology is such a massive part of our everyday lives now that we just can't avoid it. So it's just looking after the technology and the data and stuff that you've got.
Yeah, and just to highlight on that, Neil, as well, our policy does actually cover for the reputational harm and reputational damage as well as result of a cyber attack. So we will work with businesses to mitigate against reputational harm and try to stop it sort of materialize any further as well.
Yeah, great stuff. No, I think one of the big takeaways for me, and I hope for everybody who's watching this either live or afterwards, is that everybody is a target. I have a lot of customers who say to me, "Well, no, they're not going to be interested in me. I'm too small." Well, the fact that this is all automated and all, everybody's a target now. It's not, and every business has to take this stuff seriously. So, really interesting. Okay, well, I think we've pretty much reached time there, guys. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who's joined us live as well. Thank you. So finally, just Ryan, I think we would direct questions directly to Neil for insurance purposes rather than to you. So if anybody here does have any questions that they want to raise that we've not discussed, feel free to email me directly firstly, and I'll direct them to Neil. Neil can direct them to Ryan if it's relevant, and then you'll get a personal response from them. And equally, if it's relevant to me and you've got any questions about the Cyber Essentials certification and any other cybersecurity questions regarding your networks or anything else that you have, then again, I'll be happy to answer those via email personally to you as well. So we'll leave it there. Thank you again, gents, for your time. Really appreciate it. Right. Neil, always a pleasure. And hopefully we'll get together soon and talk again. But thanks everybody for joining us.
Guys. Thank you very much. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
See you again soon. Take care. Cheers.